All right, everybody. Happy New Year. This is welcome to the first Yaron Brook show. In this new year, we are 3rd of January. I hope you had a great celebration of Christmas, New Year, holidays, lots of reflection, and welcome to a whole new year of Yaron Brook shows. Hopefully, even greater and bigger success as we move into the future. So I'm excited. I hope you are too, and I hope we can build on the success we had on 20. Really build the Yaron Brook show into something more substantial, even than it was in 2018. I certainly have a lot of motivation to do that. Now, as many of you know, I have moved for the new year. I actually got on a plane on New Year's Eve and traveled vast distances to my new location. And what you're seeing here is my new office setup. It's still a work in progress, but I got all the equipment in, I got mics in, and something's not working. So for some reason, anyway, something on the sound side is not working. But video quality is good. Fix that. Give me a thumbs up on the chats if sound quality is good. I think the volume should be high and should be good. Hopefully you're not getting too much of an echoey sound. This office lacks a little bit of, I don't know, some sound absorbance, but it doesn't have that. The only problem is when I get sound from you, I'm hearing it from the wrong source, so I'm not hearing it in my headphones. Anyway, I'll work on fixing that tomorrow, but I think we can keep going. So first, let me know what you think about the sound. Sound is good. That's good. It all looks perfect. All right. So where am I? Is the real question, because I've left California. I will visit. I will vacation there. I will spend summers there. But I am no longer, as of January 1st, a resident of the great or somewhat great state of California. I'm still in the United States of America, but just barely, if that is enough of a hint, in terms of I did not sell my house. I still have my house in California, so I will still use it as my vacation home. But I am now, for all legal purposes, this year, 2018, I will not be a resident of California. But the real question is, all right, what is America still, but just barely the United States of America? What qualifies as just barely? I'm not in Vegas. I'm not in Nevada. I'm not in Texas, as much as I love Texas. I'm not in Florida. Taxes are too high in all those places. I'm not in Washington State. Washington State is in the United States. It's not barely. All right, somebody on YouTube got it. There was somebody finally on Facebook got it. I am in Puerto Rico. I've moved officially to Puerto Rico. The lights outside you see is electricity in San Juan. There really is electricity in San Juan. So yes, I am in San Juan. I've got a beautiful condo in San Juan. You can see water from every single window in the condo. The window that way, you can see the kind of the port, and you can see the big ships that drop off tourists. You can see it through that window. And I've joined Peter Schiff. So I've already talked to Peter Schiff. We're going to get together sometime. He's returning to the island, I think, tomorrow. But my wife and I are now living in Puerto Rico. Got stuck at the airport for 6 hours on the way here, not because of Puerto Rico, but because of Dallas, weather in Dallas. But we made it here New Year's Day at 4 a.m. At 4 a.m. So somebody's saying sound is terrible on Blog Talk. That's very strange. So don't know why sound on Blog Talk is terrible, but sound on Facebook is okay. Sound on YouTube is okay so far. So not sure what's going on Blog Talk. If you're on Blog Talk, I recommend switching to Facebook or to I think I know why it's awful. So you're getting a lot of kind of white noise on Blog Talk. All right, not sure why, but anyway, we'll still learn at it. Not gonna learn Spanish. No, I'm too old to learn any new languages. So my wife is fairly fluent in Spanish, so she's gonna take care of all of that. And yeah, that's it. It's pretty cool. So I'm gonna pay a lot less taxes. I'm going to live basically by the beach. I'm going to have summer all year round, which is what I love. A little too humid for me. That's the only downside so far. Food is good. People are friendly. Life is good. All right, so far 3 days in. Life is good. Keep you updated as we go, as we move forward. So, yeah. It's cool. Everything now. So right now it's 9:30 at night, 9:36 at night in Puerto Rico. I'm 4 hours ahead of California. I'm 1 hour ahead of the East Coast. There's no daylight saving time. The government does not change the clock arbitrarily in the spring and in the fall. So we're good. We're good. All right. So if somebody says it's like Tel Aviv, no. I mean, the weather here is actually much warmer than Tel Aviv. I mean, there's literally no winter. It's tropical, so it's between 80 and 90 degrees all year long during the daytime, and between 70 and 80 degrees all year long at nighttime. And that's it. That's the weather. So I have brought a lot of winter clothes with me because I'm traveling from here to Europe and to South America and to Asia and everywhere else, and to the East Coast, where I will be in a couple of weeks. So those of you in the New York area, you're all invited to debate I'm holding it's called the Soho Forum in New York City on the 16th of January. I'm debating Is Selfishness a Virtue with Gene Epstein, I think one of the editors at Barron's magazine, so with Judge Napolitano from Fox News as the moderator. So I invite you all, if you're in the New York area, to join me there. And then later on in February, I start traveling internationally. So anyway, lots of travel out of Puerto Rico all over the world. So we will continue the same frantic pace of travel. All right. We're going to not take phone calls today because I don't trust Blog Talk Radio where the phone calls are coming through on. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask, type it in to either the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat. Just put it like in all caps or something so it pops out from the rest of the chatter so I know you're actually asking a question. All right, two things I wanted to talk about. Quickly is not, we're not gonna go for long, but certainly if you've got questions, we can have on a little longer. Two things. One, I want to talk again about Iran. This, I think, is big news, and the fact that people out in the streets is important. I still think that Iran is the United States' number one enemy in the world. I think it is still the ideological heart of the Islamist movement, together with Saudi Arabia. But the difference is that in Saudi Arabia, the government claims to be opposed to the Islamist agenda, whereas in Iran, the government upholds the Islamist agenda, rules based on the Islamist agenda, and furthermore, so openly declares to the world, we want to bring Sharia to the world, we want a caliphate, we support all of the agenda of every militant Islamist group out there in the world. So With Iran, it is government policy. Indeed, they used to have a line item which was terrorism in the budget every year. They were sued in the United States for terrorist activity by a group of victims, and as a consequence of that, they basically dropped the line item. But they are the number one funder of terrorism in the world by far. In Saudi Arabia, the government rejects Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Hezbollah and a lot of these others, but the charities associated with some of the royal family fund it. So I think Iran, the mullahs, the religiosity of the regime, the fact that it is a theocracy, unapologetic theocracy, is what inspires every Islamist out there in the world. Indeed, if you read the Islamists, if you read people from Al-Qaeda, Bin Laden and others, if you read even Islamists from places like Indonesia and Malaysia, they were all inspired in 1979 by the revolution in Iran. Iran really was the inspiration for the whole resurrection of jihadism in much of the Muslim world. Jihadism was not very prevalent in Southeast Asia, was not very prevalent even in places like Pakistan until 1979. And then 1979, Iran started investing heavily in this, but more importantly, people got inspiration. Hey, we can do it. We can take over a government, we can rule, we can establish Sharia law, and the United States will do nothing. The United States will cower. The United States will negotiate for hostages, will give us arms. You know, the whole thing, the way the administrations, Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr. dealt with Iran was an inspiration to other jihadis, because they said if they won't stand up to Iran, they won't stand up to anybody. And they just, you know, kept on growing and reinforcing the worst elements. As a consequence of that, Saudi Arabia felt threatened. It felt like Iran was becoming the dominant player in the Arab Muslim world. And therefore, the Saudis stepped up funding Islamic terrorism, Islamic organizations. They became much more conservative, if you will, much more theocratic in Saudi Arabia after Iran. So Iran was really at the center. Iran has always been at the center of the entire jihadi movement. And since America won't do anything, and I believe that Israel won't do anything to change that fact, to actually, in a sense, eliminate the Iranian regime, which is what the United States should have done after 9/11 and what it should do over and over and over again should do. Since the United States will not take the action necessary to get rid of Iran, it is up to the Iranian people. The only people who can actually do it are the Iranians. The Americans won't do it. We are paper tiger. I don't care if Trump is in office. Mathis will never let Trump attack Iran, even if Trump in a moment of rage says, let's go after them. Mathis will never let it happen. Kelly would never let it happen. The Secretary of State, his national security advisor, I forget his name. None of those guys will ever let it happen, even if Trump has these flurries where he might actually think a good thought and might want to go after the Iranians. None of these guys will let it actually happen. So Iran is safe from America. Iran is safe from Israel. I can guarantee to you that the Israeli people, unfortunately, and even Netanyahu, do not want to go after Iran, even though Iran is clearly developing nuclear weapons and will become more and more of a threat the more we wait. All right, so it's left to the Iranian people. Now, inflation is high in Iran. The economy is bad. In spite of the lifting of the sanctions, the whole Obama thing, the economy is still not becoming any better. The United States is still loosened the embargo. Trump decertified the Iran deal, but that is meaningless. It hasn't really gone. Nothing's happened really. And he's basically punted. He wouldn't take actions. He's punted it to Congress, and Congress won't do anything. So even though all of this is being loosened up, the Iranian economy is weak, and it's weak not because of sanctions. It's weak because authoritarianism doesn't work, because central planning, whether in the guise of communism, socialism, or Islam, don't work. So people are out in the streets demanding change. Now, they're not demanding the kind of change we would all like, and I think they're not demanding the kind of change that they necessarily want because they're afraid. But ultimately, they are the only hope we have. So our fate, the United States' fate, Israel's fate, I think much of the West's fate lies not in the hands of our own military that could take care of Iran in a matter of days, but lies in the hands of unarmed civilian demonstrators out in the streets of Tehran, marching for their own freedom, marching for a better life. And now the question is going to be, what does the United States do about it? Does the United States get behind the demonstrators? Does the United States unequivocally support them? Now, I know Donald Trump has tweeted his support, and that's great. But it would be nice if there was an actual statement made. It would be nice if there was a speech. It would be nice if the Secretary of State actively went out there and said that we are supporting the demonstrators and that the theocratic regime in Iran should end, and should end at once. That's what the president should do. That's what a leader would do. It's not just tweets, but rally all of the government, all the mechanisms available to him, the bully pulpit, the State Department, the military, everything, to make a statement, a moral statement that will embolden the people of Iran to keep on fighting and to eliminate the theocratic regime ruling over them. Now, notice that this is what Ronald Reagan did. Ronald Reagan's foreign policy was very mixed, but the one thing he was great at is giving moral certainty. And if you ask people in Poland, like Lech Walesa and others who ultimately created a revolution in Poland, they said that the moral support that Ronald Reagan gave them was a huge inspiration for them, was a huge reason why they kept on fighting in spite of the odds and ultimately brought down communism in Poland. Now that's exactly what happens to happen now. Iran, in many respects, is as important as the fall of Iran. The fall of the theocracy is as important as the fall of communism to American security. And it's time today for the American government to get behind these demonstrators in any ways possible. Money, weapons, the CIA should be involved, but also moral statements to give them moral support. And yeah, it would be great if the United States committed itself to overthrowing the regime itself, and either by putting economic pressure on them, which is the weak response, or by actually militarily getting rid of them, right? But that's not going to happen. Trump, no Trump, I don't care. Nothing's going to happen action-wise in terms of getting rid of this regime. Again, the only hope we have is the people of Iran, and the people in Iran, the people out there in the streets, the people out there that the regime is beating and possibly killing and victimizing. They should be supported in any way the United States government can support them. Anyway. So let's hope it happens. Let's hope it happens. All right, let's see. We had a question. That's not a question. If you got a question, put them. Is ISIS Sunni jihadi movement a reaction against Shiite terrorism spread by Iran? No, it's not a reaction against at all. It's a reaction, in a sense, a reaction to, but not against. Ultimately, they share the same goal. Ultimately, they say the same goal. The goal is a caliphate. The goal is world domination by Islam. Now, one party wants Shia domination, one wants Sunni domination, but they don't really fight that much. ISIS fought with Iran, and Al-Qaeda on occasion has fought with Iran. But Iran supported Al-Qaeda. It supported bin Laden. It supported bin Laden before 9/11. It was involved in 9/11 by supporting them. Iran also supports Hamas, and Hamas is Sunni, not Shiite. ISIS decided to go against the Shiites, and that hurt them because the Iranians ultimately fought them. But all of these jihadist organizations are inspired by Iran's success. Inspired by Iran's success. Now somebody writes, do you not see contradiction here, Yaron? You've been a pretty vocal advocate of reining in the U.S.'s role as world police. Absolutely. This is not a police action. This is a military action in America's self-defense. Iran is a direct threat to the United States, but more than that, Iran has declared war on the United States by occupying the United States Embassy in 1979, by killing Americans. There's a whole list of occasions in which Iran has killed Americans. It still killed Americans until very recently all over the world. And therefore, it's not an act of police. I believe all the troops should come home after they annihilate the regime of the Iranians. You do not allow for a threatening country to survive. I'm talking about the regime. I'm not talking about killing all the people. I know some people are going to interpret that way. But you've got to eliminate the regime in Iran if you care about America first. I'm an America first guy. And I don't believe in America being the policeman of the world. I just believe in eliminating the threats to America. Mathis has no understanding of Iran. He has no understanding of the Middle East. He's very poor in military strategy. And none of this generation of generals, Petraeus, Mathis, any of them, are the kind of generals that are there to win wars and to actually, they have no understanding of what shock and awe really looks like. They have no understanding of what it would take to actually destroy a regime like Iran. Iran is nothing. We could take it in 3 weeks. They have a military that is pathetic, poorly armed. It's got a lot of old Russian weapons, some new Russian anti-plane missiles that I'm sure the United States can neutralize, just like the Israelis neutralized these missiles before. So it's no problem. It's no problem to do it properly, which means replacing the regime, which means going in there and doing whatever's necessary, and I'm not going to get into the military tactics of it, although I could, in order to do it. It is the answer. It's always been the answer. But a full economic embargo is better than not. But even that is not going to happen under this administration. And the Iranian dictatorship would not necessarily fall under an embargo. They would victimize their own people. Again, it depends on the willingness and the ability of the Iranian people to stand up to this regime, and that will not happen. That will not happen without the United States support. Mathis actually led the fight in Fallujah. Yes, he did. That's why he's so pathetic. The fight in Fallujah was one of the most pathetic military actions in American history. It was a disaster. It solved nothing. The insurgents, the terrorists, all escaped. It was announced in advance. They let everybody leave. They tried not to kill anybody. Mathis is an advocate, just like Petraeus, of just war theory and of rules of engagement that tie the hands of the soldiers and blindfold them before they go into action. So now there's not going to be an embargo on Iran, and there's not going to be military action. And if there was military action, I would be afraid, because the people that would deploy the military action, like Mathis, would screw it up. So that's the challenge. I advocate for a policy that cannot be implemented with the leadership we have today, or with the leadership we can expect to have, if you will, in the predictable future. No, we did not win Iraq. I mean, you're rewriting history if you think we won Iraq. Bush lost Iraq. Bush lost Iraq big time. What we did, and Bush created ISIS. Bush created ISIS. I mean, the rhetoric that says that we won Iraq and then Obama handed it away is, to put it bluntly, bullshit. Bush lost Iraq. Read Winning the Unwinnable War. Read all my essays going back to the 2000s about the Iraq War, why we didn't win it, and why Bush created ISIS. Why? Because the way Mathis and Petraeus won, in quotes, the battle for Fallujah and then the battle against the insurgents is by giving them cash, is by giving huge tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to Sunni tribal leaders, who then used that cash and spun it around to start ISIS. And ISIS is a financial creation of the United States, not of the Obama administration, of the Bush administration. Now, it's true, Obama reduced the forces, but if he hadn't reduced the forces, you still would have gotten ISIS. And they still would have been powerful because they had all the cash, and the Iraqi army still would have been pathetic. No, Iraq was a disaster from beginning to end. It was a Bush disaster that Obama made worse. But to blame it on Obama is rewriting history, complete rewrite of history. And the generals who led that campaign, Mathis and Petraeus and the others, were horrible, No, Bush gave them the country because Bush destabilized Iraq without giving them a proper government. So somebody says Bush created ISIS, Obama gave them a country. No, the country was a disaster before the troops left. And the conflict between Sunni and Shiite and a dysfunctional government and a pathetic constitution all fall on Bush. The idea that Bush, that you can switch blame to Obama is ridiculous. Obama inherited a horrible hand from Bush. Bush was an absolute disaster. Obama did not eliminate the forces in Iraq. He reduced them. He reduced them significantly, but there were not a lot of forces already left. And by the way, all Obama did was use the same schedule, the same timeline that the Bush administration had created. He did his foreign policy with regard to Iraq was no different than what Bush started. He started dwindling the forces and put a timeline together, which Obama just followed through. Anyway, this is all a Bush problem, the whole problem in Iraq, the whole ISIS. But it's really a Jimmy Carter problem, and it's really a Ronald Reagan problem, and a George Bush Sr. and a Bill Clinton problem, because the problem is Iran, and until we do something about Iran, nothing will change. And now, of course, it's a Donald Trump problem. So let's see what America First actually means. Let's see what America First actually means for Donald Trump. What about creating vacuum if we take out the Iranian regime? So what? I have no problem with vacuums. What you're taking out is a theocracy. So you're taking out the jihadis. You're taking out the real bad guys. What is going to fill that vacuum? What's something worse than that? I don't think so. If anything, if we're right about the Iranian people, that they're far, far more moderate than the mullahs that control them, then the vacuum in Iran would be filled by people who are much better. But even if it's not, what you do is you make clear to the world what happens when you threaten the United States. Now, I wouldn't only take out the Iranian regime. The Saudis need to be dealt with. ISIS needs to be dealt with. Al-Qaeda needs to be dealt with. Hamas and Hezbollah need to be dealt with. All of this happens. You leave Hamas and Hezbollah to the Israelis, and the U.S. can take all of it. The U.S. can take all of it. So I'm not afraid of vacuums. What I'm afraid of is explicitly bad guys who flout the United States, who in spite of our threats, just develop nuclear weapons on the side, fund terrorism on the side, and completely, utterly ignore us. And what happens if you get far along on this, is what happens is you get a North Korea. You get a regime that already has nukes, but now you get a regime that's suicidal because they believe there are virgins waiting for them if they die in a jihad. And now they have nukes, and how do you deal with them? It becomes almost impossible, and you're seeing that with North Korea. I mean, what do we do with North Korea? What's Trump actually going to do with North Korea? Nothing. And you don't want to get to a situation where the Iranians are launching. They already have long-range missiles, and now they've connected a nuke to it. You're in real trouble when that happens. But that's going to happen. So we're going to find out how we deal with it, because it's going to happen, because Trump will do nothing about Iran. And I don't believe a future president would do anything about Iran. So we're stuck with this situation for the foreseeable future. All right. Let me see. Let me just say about, somebody asked, okay, why is the UN so useless in playing an active role against terrorism? Because the UN is occupied by many, many countries that support terrorism, that instigate terrorism, that support the goal of the terrorists. I mean, when Saudi Arabia and Iran and Libya and Syria and Venezuela are all sitting at the same table, i.e. in the same organization, the UN, then why are they going to do anything against terrorism? I've said this on a past show, and you can find the video of it. The UN is one of the most immoral organizations ever created. There should be no UN. If Trump was even half serious about an America First foreign policy, the first act that he would take was to extract the United States from the UN, eliminate its sanction of the UN, stop funding the UN, take over the building in New York. Donald Trump knows how valuable that real estate is. The United States should have nothing to do with this immoral organization. And then if you want to set up a kind of a League of Nations, but only nations that respect rights, only nations that respect individual rights, at least somewhat. So you would have some of the European nations, you would have Israel, you would have Japan, you would have South Korea, you would have a few other nations from Asia and from Latin America, and that's it. And let the rest of the world rot. But unless so Ayn Rand said that a government of a country that does not respect the rights of its own citizens has no legitimacy. In other words, and so the UN should only accept countries, or a replacement to the UN. The UN is finished. The replacement to the UN should only accept countries as members who are legitimate, and therefore who are, at least to some extent, rights respecting. No, I mean, the UN cannot do it. You have a Human Rights Commission in which the biggest violators of human rights are sitting on it. I mean, the UN is a joke. But it's always been a joke. Let's be clear. It's always been a joke. I said this in my other show. When in the founding of the UN, when you give Joseph Stalin and the President of the United States equal rights at the UN Security Council, that's evil in and of itself. Joseph Stalin is a monster. To sit down at the same table with a monster is immoral. To negotiate with a monster is immoral. To give a monster veto rights on anything is immoral. So the UN was set up as an immoral institution, as a horrible institution. So it's problematic from the beginning, and it cannot be. It has no accountability, but it serves no purpose. If you want an international organization, it has to be an international organization of free countries. Of free countries. All right. Let's see quickly here. Does your opinion of NATO deviate from your opinion of the UN? Yes, I mean, NATO is a better organization. I still don't think that the United States should be a member of NATO. I do not believe that the United States should be guaranteeing the security of European countries. I think that if NATO became like the replacement for the UN, an association of free countries where they construct strategies on how to deal with unfree countries and how to deal with enemies, then it would be a legitimate organization. But for the United States to guarantee the security of Estonia is ridiculous. Or Germany is even more ridiculous. Germany is a wealthy country. It can afford to protect itself. What threat today, military threat, affects Germany that would affect the United States? Russia? I mean, Russia is not, in my view, Russia is not a threat militarily to the U.S. And if it's a threat militarily to Germany, then Germany needs to do something about it. Germany's rich enough to take care of that itself. So I'm for the United States. Again, America first. For the United States, a real America first, not this pretend mockery of an America first that Donald Trump is, but a real America first, which would say, no, we're not going to be in NATO. You guys defend yourself. You guys pay for your own defense. We will coordinate stuff with you on common threats, but we're not going to guarantee your safety. I would do the same, by the way, with South Korea and Taiwan. I do not believe that the United States, certainly not South Korea, needs to be a guarantor for the safety and security of every free country in the world. I think that's a huge strategic mistake. I think those countries can afford to defend themselves. And then if a threat develops that is threatening to the U.S., like North Korea has ballistic missiles, or Iran, then the United States needs to take care of it. And if it has allies who join in the fight, then great. But they don't have to join in the fight, and we don't have to join in their fights. You have to decide on the spot whether to do it or not. All right, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's the UN is not so much. It's somewhat about wealth redistribution, but not really. It's not a huge amount of wealth redistribution going on through the UN. If you look at the budget, it's just a lot of money wasted, thrown away, but it's not massive. It's not huge quantities of money. The main problem is the moral sanction that we give to treating all these countries as equal. Okay, let's see. I recommend reading Peter Schwartz's book on foreign policy of self-interest. So look it up on Amazon. Look Peter Schwartz. And look at that book. I recommend Ilan Journo's edited book on Winning the Unwinnable War. Those are the best books on foreign policy, on modern foreign policy, on the way it is today. All right, let's see. Okay, here's a question that's not relevant to this topic, but that's okay. Would Charles Manson be allowed any legitimate human right on any legitimate? No, he shouldn't be. But if he was in the UN, if he had his own country, Charles Manson, many Charles Mansons have had their own countries, and they were allowed not only to sit in the UN, but to be on the Human Rights Commission. And yet, that's what Stalin was, that's what Mao was, that's what Chavez in Venezuela was. I mean, the idea that Chavez would come to the United States, to be in New York, go to a building in New York City to rail against America from his socialist, this maniac. The fact that is allowed is so horrific. It's so horrific. It's just absurd. But that's the UN for you. All right. All right. I have a question here on Trump's comment on the post office and Amazon. I mean, Trump said the post office was giving too good of a deal to Amazon, and they should raise their rates, and it's a subsidy to Amazon. And there's some truth to that, but it's also, I think, reflects on his part a massive misunderstanding of basic economics and business practices. What would happen? Why is Amazon using the post office? Because they're cheaper than UPS, FedEx, and any other alternative out there. Yeah, they're cheap. And yeah, it's not a direct subsidy to Amazon in a sense that because the direct subsidy is first-class mail, that's where they really lose money. But, it's cheap. And maybe the post office is even losing money a little bit on Amazon. But what would happen if the post office raised their fees on Amazon? I mean, it's obvious. Amazon would any day rather deal with UPS and FedEx because they're private organizations. And, so it's just basic economic principles that if the post office raised their fees, Amazon would bolt in a minute. The post office has to have particularly low fees because nobody wants to deal with the post office. They have to lower even their usual fees lower for Amazon to deal with them. So it's just a silly, again, one of these silly comments. I mean, Donald Trump has something against Amazon, primarily the fact that it's Amazon's CEO and largest shareholder, Jeff Bezos, owns the Washington Post. This is why Donald Trump is such a threat to the First Amendment, is that he goes after Amazon, threatens Amazon, antitrust. He has his Justice Department look at Amazon, all at the same time as criticizing the Washington Post. And he even said during the campaign, I'll get that Jeff Bezos through, the Washington Post thing. So anyway, through the Amazon thing. So it's really despicable that he does this. Okay, what is your view on financial aid to Israel? I'm against it. I don't believe Israel should get one dime of financial aid from the United States, except the United States should sell Israel weapons. The United States should only sell weapons to its allies. It shouldn't sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. It shouldn't sell weapons to Egypt. But it should sell weapons to Israel. But other than that, and it should, help maybe fund certain military research like the Iron Dome, which then the United States can use for its own self-defense, and it is using in places like South Korea. So it should it shouldn't give any welfare to Israel. Israel doesn't need it. It's a rich country. It can afford it itself. And indeed, all that it does is it inculcates a mentality in Israel of a dependent, which is bad for Israel. All right, I just wanted to say one, final comment, and I know somebody asked about this earlier. There's this fight between Trump and Bannon. I mean, from my perspective, couldn't happen to two nicer guys, and all the power to them. I hope they fight and they continue to fight. I hope from under the rubble a better Republican Party arises. I hope that out of the fight between Trump and Bannon, maybe the Republican Party wakes up to what the monster it has created. But we will see. I have my doubts about all of that. But I mean, generally, anything that adds the demise of Steve Bannon, I am for. And in this case, even if the vehicle for the demise of Steve Bannon happens to be Trump, so be it. Bannon, I believe, is worse than Trump. As bad as I think Trump is, Bannon is worse. But let them go at it. Let them have fun. All right. As I said, many of you missed the announcement because you came in late. I have officially, as of January 1st, moved to Puerto Rico. I am now living in San Juan in a beautiful condo overlooking the ocean. And I'm hoping Puerto Rico does not become a state. I think Peter Schiff and I are going to scheme to take Puerto Rico independent and to turn it into the Hong Kong of the Caribbean. That is our goal. I haven't talked to Pete about this, but I'm sure he'll be on board. All right. Thanks all. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow at about the same time. And I do want to recommend. I did a show with Tara Smith that went live, I think, a few days ago. It's both on Blog Talk Radio and on YouTube. Go watch it. It's excellent. It's on happiness. What could be better than a show on happiness? So it was a wonderful exchange. It was really fun. She did great. And so go to YouTube or Blog Talk Radio and go watch my interview with Tara Smith on happiness. Many more interviews to come. So stay tuned. Have a great new year and talk to you all tomorrow.